basement studio on West Grand Boulevard in Detroit, Michigan, Gordy started a record label with an $800 loan. He called it Hitsville U.S.A. What came out of that building over the next 2 decades was not just music. It was a revolution, a sound that crossed color lines, crashed through radio walls, and filled living rooms from Detroit to London to Lagos. These were not just songs. These were moments, performances that stopped time, nights when a voice, a stage, and the weight of an entire era collided into something the world would never forget. This is Groove Lens, counting down the 12 greatest Motown performances ever captured on this earth. Number 12, Mary Wells, My Guy, Shindig, 1964.
My guy.
Before the Supremes, before Diana Ross was a household name, before any of it, there was Mary Wells. Born in Detroit in 1943, Mary grew up poor, survived spinal meningitis and tuberculosis as a child, and walked into a nightclub one night with a song she had written herself. She wasn't looking for a deal. She was trying to pitch the song to Jackie Wilson. Gordy heard her instead. He signed her on the spot. And for the next 3 years, Mary Wells became the first queen of Motown, before anyone else had even claimed the title. As a matter of opinion, I think he's... By 1964, Smokey Robinson had written her something special, a song called My Guy, finger-snapping, smooth, sophisticated, a declaration of total loyalty from a woman who wasn't going anywhere. My guy, no. Released on March 13, 1964, it climbed to number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. That week, it knocked out Louis Armstrong, and then the Beatles came to knock it off the top. The irony? The Beatles had named Mary Wells as one of their favorite Motown artists. She would tour with them in the UK later that same year. As a matter of opinion, I think he's... The live performance on the 1964 television show Shindig is on YouTube right now. Watch a young woman in her early 20s command a stage like she had been doing it her whole life. My God, no. Then know this. The moment that song peaked, Mary turned 21, got out of her Motown contract, and left. Her career was never the same again. Smokey Robinson would later say he wrote My Girl for the Temptations partly as a response to My Guy. One queen inspired the next classic. That is the power of what Mary Wells started. Number 11, Martha Reeves and the Vandellas, Dancing in the Street, The TMI Show, 1964. Here is a story about a song that was never supposed to be political. Summer. Mickey Stevenson, a Motown executive, was watching kids in a Detroit street crack open a fire hydrant to cool off in the heat. When the water shot out and drenched them, they leapt. They jumped through it. And in that moment, Stevenson thought, they look like they're dancing. He went back to Hitsville, wrote the song with Marvin Gaye and Ivy Jo Hunter, and they needed a voice. Martha Reeves was working as a secretary at Motown, just a regular day at the office, until Marvin Gaye spotted her in the hallway hearing the playback and said his exact words, "Hey man, let's try this song on Martha." They recorded it on June 19, 1964. Martha got one perfect take. The machine wasn't rolling. When they told her to do it again, she was heartbroken. But the second take was extraordinary anyway. Released July 31st, 1964, Dancing in the Street reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100. But what nobody fully understood at the time is what the song would become. The civil rights movement was in full swing. Black activist H. Rap Brown started playing a song during street demonstrations. Lyrics like "Callin' Out Around the World" and "Let's Form a Big Strong Line" took on a new meaning nobody had planned. Martha denied the political subtext publicly for years, but privately she later wrote in her autobiography, it became the anthem of the decade. The 1964 TAMI show performance is on YouTube. Martha Reeves front and center, voice like a thunderclap, singing a song that was supposed to be about kids in a street and became a rallying cry for a nation. Number 10, Little Stevie Wonder, Fingertips, Part 2, The Motown Revue, Regal Theater, Chicago, 1963. He was 12 years old. Stevland Hardaway Morris, blind since age 7, had already recorded 3 singles for Motown. None of them charted. The label called him Little Stevie Wonder. Nobody outside of Detroit had heard of him. In 1963, Motown sent out the Motown Revue, a traveling package show of their biggest acts hitting cities across America. The lineup included the Marvelettes, the Contours, Marvin Gaye, and at the end of the bill, a 12-year-old boy with a harmonica. The song was Fingertips, written by Clarence Paul and Henry Cosby. It was originally a jazz instrumental, no lyrics, just Stevie's bongos and harmonica, and the sheer force of a child who had been playing since he could reach the keys. At the Regal Theater in Chicago, something happened that nobody planned. Stevie finished his set. His handler started walking him off stage. The audience was applauding. The next act was already moving into position. And then Stevie turned around, ran back to the mic, and started playing again, improvising, calling and responding to the crowd, doing things a 12-year-old had no business doing on a stage. You can hear the bassist from the next act, completely caught off guard, shout into the mic, "What key? What key?"
Yeah, yeah.
Marvin Gaye, who had been playing drums that night, was still in position at the kit. He caught up with Stevie, and together they turned the end of that set into something electric. When the live recording was released, Fingertips Part 2 went to number 1 on August 10th, 1963. His album hit number 1 the same week, making Stevie Wonder the first artist in history to have a number 1 album and a number 1 single simultaneously.
I know that everybody had, yeah.
He was 13. The performance is on YouTube. Watch a child become a legend in real time.
Yeah.
Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. Number 9, Edwin Starr, War. Television performance 1970. Motown was not supposed to release this song. Norman Whitfield and Barrett Strong wrote War for the Temptations in 1969. The Temptations recorded it. The lyrics were devastating, a full-throated attack on the Vietnam War. And then Motown got scared. More than 4,000 students wrote letters to the label, demanding they release the Temptations version as a single. Berry Gordy refused. The Temptations were too big, too commercially important. A protest record could cost them everything, so Gordy made a different call. He found a singer with less to lose. Edwin Starr had come into the Motown family in 1968 when Gordy bought out Rick Tick Records, a rival Detroit label. He was talented, he was powerful, but he was not yet a star. When they offered him War, Starr had one condition, he said, and these are his words: I must record it with the feeling that I thought was right for it. They gave him that privilege. What came out was one of the most ferocious vocal performances in the history of recorded music. Starr didn't ask if War was good for anything. He demanded the answer. His voice was pure rage, pure grief. The interjections, good God, y'all, and absolutely nothing were all his own, not in the original, born in the studio. Released June 10, 1970, it reached number 1 on August 29th and stayed there for 3 weeks. It was later inducted into both the Grammy Hall of Fame and the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. John Lennon praised it. Bruce Springsteen performed it on one of the greatest live albums ever recorded. The live television performance from 1970 is on YouTube. Watch a man who was handed someone else's song and turned it into his own war cry. Number 8, Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, The Tracks of My Tears. The Ed Sullivan Show, 1965.
People say I'm the life of the party.
Rolling Stone magazine named it the greatest Motown song of all time. Not My Girl, not What's Going On, not I Heard It Through the Grapevine. The Tracks of My Tears, 1965. Here is how it started. Marv Tarplin, the Miracles guitarist, was sitting around one day, riffing on chord changes from Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat song. He switched the rhythm, rearranged the chords, and walked away with something that sounded like heartbreak itself. Smokey Robinson heard it and went quiet. Then he looked in the mirror one day and asked himself, what if someone cried so much you could actually see the tracks of their tears on their face? He wrote the song, he and Pete Moore and Marv Tarplin, 3 men from Detroit, and they recorded it at Hitsville, U.S.A. on May 19, 1965. The song is about a man so wrecked by heartbreak that he wears a smile like a costume. He performs happiness for the world. But look closer. Look at the tracks on his face, and you will see the truth.
Since you left me, if you see me with another girl.
It charted. It was covered by everyone from Linda Ronstadt to Dolly Parton to Boyz II Men. When Adam Lambert sang it on American Idol, Smokey Robinson stood up and gave him a standing ovation. The RIA and the National Endowment for the Arts placed it among the 365 greatest songs of the 20th century. The Rock and Roll Hall of Fame put it on its list of 500 songs that shaped rock and roll. The Ed Sullivan Show performance from 1965 is on YouTube. Smokey Robinson in a sharp suit, that guitar riff opening, and a voice so smooth and so broken at the same time that you forget the two things should not go together. But they do. That is the miracle of this song. Number 7, The Temptations. My Ed Sullivan Show, May 28, 1967. Smokey Robinson did not write this song for himself. He wrote it for a voice he could not get out of his head. David Ruffin had just joined the Temptations, replacing original member Elbridge Bryant. He was new, still finding his place, and Smokey caught him singing a Drifter's song at the 20 Grand nightclub in Detroit and stopped. He told people later, Ruffin had a quality that was impossible to explain, a voice that was mellow and gruff at the same time, a voice that, in Smokey's words, demanded the girls to love him. Smokey went home and wrote the sweetest possible song he could imagine. Something the girls could just swoon over, something to balance that rawness. An answer record in a way to My Guy, the song he had written for Mary Wells the year before. This time, From a Man's Side of Love, My Girl was recorded in the fall of 1964, released December 21st. By March 6, 1965, it was number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The Temptations' first million seller, David Ruffin's first lead vocal on a single, 7 times platinum, inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 1998. Chosen for the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2017, ranked 43rd on Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Songs of All Time. But the performance, The Ed Sullivan Show, May 28, 1967, that is a different kind of proof. 5 men in sparkling suits, synchronized like clockwork. David Ruffin front and center, commanding that stage with the kind of confidence you only have when you know what you are holding. It is on YouTube. Watch Ruffin. Watch the moment a new voice claimed its throne. Number 6, Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Television performance, 1967. Ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide. This is a love story and a tragedy, and one of the greatest musical partnerships Motown ever produced. Ain't no river wide enough to keep. Nick Ashford and Valerie Simpson wrote the song in 1966. They had been inspired by a walk through Central Park, the skyscrapers of Manhattan towering around them like mountains. I'm getting to you, baby. Remember the day. Dusty Springfield heard it first and wanted it. They turned her down. They were holding it, they said, hoping it would get them into Motown. It did. I'll be there when you want me some way, somehow. Barry Gordy heard the song and assigned it to 2 of his most promising young artists, Marvin Gaye, the Prince of Motown, and Tammi Terrell, a 22-year-old from Philadelphia who had already spent 2 years touring with James Brown's live show. No wind, no rain. They recorded their first session together in December 1966, and from the first note, the chemistry was undeniable. Motown marketed them as a beautiful young couple. Oh, baby, there ain't no mountain high enough. They were electric together on stage, voices wrapping around each other like the song had been written for two people to breathe.
I'll be there when you want me some way, somehow.
Released April 20th, 1967, it reached number 19, a disappointment at the time, but the world would catch up. Because on October 14th, 1967, everything changed.
Ain't no valley low enough.
Tammi Terrell collapsed on stage, mid-song, at Hampton Sydney College in Virginia. She fell into Marvin Gaye's arms. She was diagnosed with a malignant brain tumor. She was 24 years old. She spent the next 3 years dying of it, 8 brain surgeries. And on March 16, 1970, Tammi Terrell passed away.
Don't you know that there ain't no mountain high?
It destroyed Marvin Gaye. He stopped performing live for 4 years. The grief fed directly into the masterpiece that would follow, What's Going On.
I'll be there on the double, just as fast as I can.
The live television performance of Ain't No Mountain High Enough from 1967 is on YouTube. Two young people at the peak of their chemistry, singing about a love that has no limits, before the world took everything from them. Watch it knowing what you know now. It hits different.
Ain't no valley low enough.
Number 5, Diana Ross, Ain't No Mountain High Enough. Diana, TV special, 1971. She had just left the Supremes, the most successful female group in American music history. 3 consecutive number ones, national icons, and she walked away from all of it to stand alone. Diana Ross's first solo single was Reach Out and Touch Somebody's Hand. It peaked at number 20. Meanwhile, the Supremes, without her, released their first single and hit number 10. Diana was losing ground, and she knew it. She told audiences at her early solo shows with a kind of painful humor, "Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Let's See If Diana Ross Can Do It by Herself show." Ashford and Simpson had an idea. They took a song they had already written for Marvin Gaye and Tammi Terrell, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, and they rebuilt it from the ground up for Diana. 6 minutes long, gospel strings, horns, spoken word passages, a complete rearrangement. Diana was apprehensive at first, but she trusted them.
And if you should miss my loving.
Released July 16, 1970. By September 13th, it was number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, 3 weeks at the top, her first solo number 1. It was also one of 7 Motown number 1s that year, a record for the label. On April 18, 1971, Diana performed it on her ABC television special, simply titled Diana, and it was electric. A woman who had been told, quietly by the chart positions, that maybe she couldn't do it alone, standing on that stage in a single spotlight, delivering a 6-minute performance that answered every question with authority. The performance from the Diana special is on YouTube. Watch a woman prove the doubters wrong in real time. Number 4, the Four Tops, Reach Out, I'll Be There. The Ed Sullivan Show, October 16, 1966. Gordy told them before the song was even released. He pulled aside Duke Fakir, one of the Four Tops' founding members, and said, "Get your tax affairs in order." That is how confident Gordy was. This song was going to change everything.
Come on, girl, reach on out for me.
The song was Reach Out, I'll Be There, written and produced by Holland Dozier Holland, the greatest songwriting team Motown ever had. But here is what made it extraordinary. Eddie Holland wrote the song specifically to push lead singer Levi Stubbs to the absolute top of his vocal range. He knew something about Levi that other producers had missed. Duke Fakir explained it plainly years later. Eddie realized that when Levi hit the top of his range, it sounded like someone hurting. So he built the entire song right up there, at the ceiling, where the voice starts to crack with emotion, where you can hear the tears hiding just inside the notes. Levi complained. He said it was too high, too difficult, but he loved it anyway. The Four Tops recorded the entire song in just 2 takes and assumed it was a throwaway album track. Phil Spector heard the recording and called it Black Dylan, released August 18, 1966. #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, #1 on the R&B chart, simultaneously. Rolling Stone ranked it among the 500 greatest songs of all time. The Library of Congress selected it for the National Recording Registry. The Ed Sullivan Show performance, filmed the exact week it reached #1, is on YouTube right now. Watch Levi Stubbs on that stage. Watch a man singing at the very edge of what his voice can do and somehow going further. #3, Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Kennedy Center, Washington, D.C., May 1st, 1972.
Brother, brother, brother.
Marvin Gaye had not performed live in 4 years, not since the night Tammi Terrell fell into his arms on stage. The grief had swallowed him whole. He went silent, stopped touring, disappeared into the studio.
You know
What came out of that silence was, What's Going On? The album Barry Gordy called, and I quote, the worst thing I ever heard. He refused to release it. Marvin threatened to quit Motown entirely. Gordy eventually relented, and the album, inspired by Marvin's brother Frankie's letters home from Vietnam, by the 1965 Watts riots, by a generation drowning in poverty and war and unanswered prayers, became Motown's best-selling album to date. On May 1st, 1972, the city of Washington, D.C. declared it Marvin Gaye Day. The mayor gave him the key to the city. Students at Cardozo High School, where Marvin had attended as a boy, cheered in the hallways. That night, he was booked to perform at the Kennedy Center. He almost didn't go. His mother had to talk him into it. He was still grieving, still fragile, still not entirely sure he could stand on a stage and hold the weight of everything he had written. But he walked out, and he performed the entire What's Going On album live, from beginning to end, the only time he ever did it in his entire career. 9 songs, a meditation on Vietnam, police brutality, poverty, whether God could still hear a country tearing itself apart. The nervousness was real, the grief was real, the love was real. Rolling Stone later ranked the album #1, the greatest album ever made.
with brutality. Talk to me, talk to me.
The Kennedy Center performance is on YouTube. Give yourself the full hour. Listen to what a man sounds like when he stops singing for the world and starts singing to it. Number 2, the Jackson 5. I Want You Back, The Ed Sullivan Show, December 14, 1969. 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana, and a credit dispute that would follow Motown forever. When the Jackson 5 walked out on The Ed Sullivan Show on December 14, 1969, Ed Sullivan pointed to Diana Ross in the audience and called her the woman who discovered them. That was not entirely true. It was Gladys Knight, the Empress of Soul, who had seen the boys at the Apollo Theater in August 1967 and called Berry Gordy personally. She told him he had to sign them. It took until July 1968 for Gordy to finally meet them. By then, the oldest brother Jackie was 17. Michael was 9. Their debut album was released just days before the Ed Sullivan appearance. The single, I Want You Back, had been written by a team of songwriters Gordy called The Corporation. It was a plea, urgent, desperate, a boy begging for a second chance. And the voice delivering it, an 11-year-old Michael Jackson in a purple fedora and fringed vest, sounded like someone who had been broken by love for 30 years. Smokey Robinson watched from the wings that night and later said, Michael at a very young age had a lot of know to be able to sing a song like that. The set was 3 songs. They opened with a Sly and the Family Stone cover. Then Michael told the audience a story about a girl he met in a sandbox at school, completely charming the room before launching into Smokey Robinson's Who's Loving You? A ballad, a devastating adult heartbreak ballad, sung by an 11-year-old with the weight of someone twice his age. When they finished, Ed Sullivan looked at the audience and said what the whole country was already thinking. The little fella in front is incredible. I Want You Back sold over 6 million copies worldwide. The Jackson 5 would appear on The Ed Sullivan Show 5 times between 1969 and 1976. The December 14th performance is on YouTube. Watch the exact moment the world met the future king of pop. Number 1, Michael Jackson, Billie Jean, Motown 25, Yesterday, Today and Forever, March 25, 1983. There was one rule. Motown was taping its 25th anniversary special, and the producers had a single condition. Every song performed had to be from the Motown catalog. Michael Jackson had one counter condition. He would only perform if he could do Billie Jean, a song on Epic Records, a song that had nothing to do with Motown, a song that was, at that moment, sitting at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. They went back and forth. Michael was immovable. The producers eventually gave in. On March 25, 1983, at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, the Jackson brothers performed their medley of Motown hits. Then they left the stage, and Michael was alone. He was wearing a black sequin jacket, white socks, a single rhinestone glove, and a black fedora. He stood there for a moment, and then the bass line of Billie Jean began. He moved through the song, building, spinning, And then, during the bridge, something happened that had never been seen before on live television. He spun, landed on his toes, and glided backwards while his feet moved forward. The moonwalk, Born Live, in front of 47 million Americans. The audience erupted. They knew, even in that first moment, they knew they were watching something that had never existed before. Here is what almost nobody knows. Backstage after the performance, Michael cried. Not from joy, from disappointment. He told Oprah Winfrey in 1993 that he hadn't held his toe stand long enough, that he hadn't executed it the way he wanted. The man who had just redefined performance was unhappy with his own performance. Every show he did after that night mirrored Motown 25 exactly, because he knew what he had built. He knew the dividing line, before that night and after. The special aired on NBC on May 16, 1983. An estimated 50 million people watched. Sales of Thriller, which had already been out for 4 months, exploded. It would become the best-selling album of all time. The full performance is on YouTube. Watch what it looks like when a human being transcends the limits of what performance is supposed to be. The Moonwalk. Motown 25, March 25th, 1983.